American community. Mrs. Pucinski is our hero, as was her father, Roman Pucinski, the Chief Prosecutor of the London Commission. So, with great honor and pleasure, please welcome Aurelia Pucinski.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you all for inviting me to join you today. This is a mission that is very dear to my heart. You can imagine growing up in a Polish household. My grandparents were both, all four of them were Polish. My parents were fluently bilingual. I unfortunately lost my talent with the Polish language after my grandparents died and we stopped speaking it at home. But the stories of living in Poland, the stories of coming to America, the stories that my grandparents told, the stories that my father and mother told, are still with me today, and so I value this experience. But we are here today to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the second free Poland. For 123 years, the land of Poland was partitioned, battled over, and occupied. Then, by a combination of talents, including Prime Minister Paderewski and President Woodrow Wilson, Poland was declared a free and independent state in 1918 after World War I. The passion for independence is core to the heritage of Poles across the world. From the Constitution of 1791, which generated and guaranteed human dignity and due process and religious freedom for all people, the common thread of Polish history is the hard-fought right of self-determination. And just as Poland's neighbors, Russia and Germany, could not stand the enlightened constitution, and so Poland's Catherine the Great, Russia and Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire divided Poland once again for their own greedy goals from 1795 to 1918. What is not surprising is the resilience of Polish people. Resisting domination until the end of World War I, they never capitulated to their occupiers. In 1918, when independence was finally theirs again, Poles across the world celebrated the fulfillment of their fondest dream. In truth, the years between 1918 and 1939 were tough. They showed some flawed leaders, some errors in judgment, some errors in political and diplomatic endeavors, some military judgment that was perhaps, with hindsight, second-guessed. So, what we see in 1939 is a Poland that has been free for roughly 20 years, but is still struggling to find a way to survive. No surprise in the struggle when you've got Germany constantly messing around with Polish people and messing around with Polish industry, and you've got Russia constantly threatening them, and after having fought, as we just heard, several border wars. So when the Nazis invaded Poland in 1939, the struggle began all over again. And again, the overwhelming endurance of the Polish people in the face of horrible oppression and destruction was an inspiration to the world, fighting so desperately against the evil designs of Adolf Hitler. The fact that Britain and France joined the war in support of their ally is to their credit. The fact that America sat back and dragged its heels is perhaps one of the saddest chapters of our own history. Moreover, the decision of Franklin Roosevelt to allow Russia to once again occupy Poland is a significant indictment of our foreign policy process. By ignoring all reliable and relevant information about Russian atrocities, Roosevelt opposed a war ally but created the Iron Curtain, which dominated millions of people by Russia. The Katyn Massacre is an important part of this. In 1940, about 20,000 Polish officers and important civilians were murdered in Katyn Forest and buried in mass graves. In 1943, those mass graves were discovered by the Nazis, and they began to publicize the fact that they had found these mass graves. The Russians, of course, blamed the Nazis and said, oh, we didn't do it, the Nazis did it. And this went on for several years, although there were many broadcasts and many streams of information available in America beginning at that time, that some of it was German propaganda and some of it was through other sources, that these murders and these mass graves have been found. In 1943, the Nazis directed a few of their prisoners of war to go to the Katyn forest and observe what was going on at the mass grave sites. Colonel Van Vliet was one of those people. It was years later, in 51 actually, that the United States Congress was motivated by pressure from Polish Americans throughout the nation to establish the Select Committee on the Katyn Forest Massacre. The Select Committee, also called the Madden Committee, was tasked with the job of figuring out who did it, the Nazis or the Russians. Let's get this straight once and for all. And as luck would have it for me and my family, they hired as the chief investigator, my late father, Aurelia Pucinski, who at the time was a fluent bilingual investigative reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. He took to the job with great passion, and I was, of course, a very young child at the time, but I remember he was in Washington, he was in Poland, he was in England, he was in different states. He wasn't home, basically, for a year and a half. But we got postcards from every place he would went to. And the Madden Commission investigated this thoroughly. They had 100 witnesses, a mountain of documents, a mountain of evidence, and it based primarily on the Van Vliet testimony and Van Vliet report and the manner in which these 20,000 officers and civilians were killed. The committee came to the inescapable conclusion that the Russians perpetrated this crime, a crime against humanity which to this day has not yet been declared a genocide by any organized body of law. And that is something that this organization and I personally will work with every member of Congress to make sure is corrected. In 1990, the Russians admitted they did it. They released the documents, they released the order signed by Stalin, has commemorated the Katyn Forest Massacre with visits to monuments. There's no doubt anymore. What's happening today? Let's talk about what's happening today. Today, Poland is once again the victim of Russian intrigue and aggression by the disinformation campaign that Poland is waging against the belief that the Russians were responsible for Katyn Forest. They're posting articles, they're finding people who will stand up and say, no, it wasn't the Russians, it was the Nazis. And we have to be very, very careful as Polish Americans to make sure that that disinformation campaign, that fake news campaign, that propaganda campaign does not take hold. If nothing came of the Katyn Forest Massacre, except for it to be obliterated in history by Russian disinformation, and for Poland to once again be pals with Russia, the work that every person has done to get a free nation of Poland, right from the beginning of 1918, through the beginning of the Solidarity Movement, through the beginning of Poland being in NATO, will be for nothing. And we must be very, very vigilant to make sure that the Russians who acknowledge that they are responsible, who were found responsible by the House of Representatives of this American democracy, after a thorough investigation, continue to be held responsible for the murder, the genocide of 20,000 Polish Army officers and civilians. Why did they do it? I talked to my friends who are not Polish, like, well, it was war. They killed soldiers. No. That's not why they did it. Sure, and more soldiers get killed, but that's not what was going on. They wanted to make sure that the leadership of Poland and the intelligentsia of Poland were obliterated because they knew from the very beginning of the war, 1939, the Nazis invaded from the west, the Soviets invaded from the east. Russia always wanted Poland. They always wanted it. And they knew Poland is very resilient. Polish people have a great deal of inner strength. Polish people have a lot of courage. Polish people are determined to have their freedom. The Russians knew that. What's one of the ways to stop it? Get rid of the people who write editorials. Get rid of the priests. Get rid of the lawyers. Get rid of the doctors. Get rid of the army officers who have intelligence and can provide leadership to a restored Poland. And that's what they did. In America, unfortunately, we're used to short-term plans. Our American democracy, the way we elect officials, Select Congress every 2 years, the Senate every 6 years, governors mostly every 4 years, presidents every 4 years. We have short-term plans. We're lucky if a plan in America can last 18 months. Russia has had a long-term plan for 100 years, the domination of Western Europe. And they will always start with Poland. Poland is an easy target for them because the Poles are right there next to them. Because the Poles, although they have good alliances with America and with other nations, cannot always rely on their allies to help them. We know, for example, that Poland asked for a strong missile defense system on its eastern border. America promised it and never delivered it. So the Russians see that. They see America not giving Poland visa waivers. They see America not giving Poland a missile defense system. They see Americans fighting among each other on Polish issues. They see Poles fighting among each other on Polish issues. And they figure, great, this is an opportunity. In chaos for Russia, there is opportunity. And you can count on Russia to stow chaos every which way they can. So I congratulate you for having this wonderful opportunity to celebrate 100 years of struggle and success, but I also caution all of us to go back to our home states, home communities, and make sure that everyone that we know and everyone who will listen to us and everyone who will talk to us about the situation understands there is danger on the Eastern Front, and we must be vigilant and aware of it. Thank you very much.